Welcome to Psych Talk. I am your host, Jessica Lee, a licensed clinical psychologist. It is my mission to motivate, inspire, and educate you on everything psychology, mental health, and self-growth. Although topics discussed on this podcast are similar to therapy, Psych Talk is not a replacement for therapy and is for educational and entertainment purposes only. Whether you are a mental health professional or student in the social science field, are interested in psychology and mindset shifts, or are just interested in gaining skills and knowledge to grow into the best version of yourself, this podcast is for you. My hope is to provide you with knowledge and skills that you can implement in your daily life that add up to make a big impact. Let's dive into today's episode. Hey everyone, welcome back to season 5 of Psych Talk. I am so happy to be sitting down in front of a microphone recording this episode for you. It has been a while since I sat down solo to record an episode, but it feels so good to be back. It is the new year, so happy 2025. So as I was thinking about what I wanted to do for this episode, I knew I wanted to tie it into the new year, but I didn't want to repeat what I have discussed in the past, nor do a basic episode on goal setting. So last year, I discussed being mindful and intentional in the new year, which was episode 168. The year prior, I did an episode on diet culture and the new year, which was episode 117. Prior to that, I did an episode on cultivating a growth mindset, which was episode 75. And my first New Year's episode was on having a value-aligned 2021, which was episode 37, although values can absolutely be applied to any year. So this year, when reflecting on what I wanted to talk about entering 2025, the upcoming changes that we are going to have in the US with the new presidential administration, and the changes I have gone through in the past year, both personally and professionally, I landed on the topic of self-reflection. So today we are going to be talking about self-reflection in the new year. Although really of much of what I'm going to discuss in today's episode can be applied to self-reflection at any time. It doesn't have to be explicitly in the new year, but that is the topic for today, so I hope you enjoy. So first and foremost, what is self-reflection? Self-reflection is the examination, contemplation, and analysis of one's thoughts, feelings, and actions. In clinical psychology, there is also a term called reflective functioning that describes a person's ability to reflect on experiences, draw inferences about behavior from these reflections, and then use those inferences to construct and develop presentations of the self. By engaging in self-reflection or reflective functioning, we are able to better understand ourselves, how we think, feel, and behave, and gain a better sense of who we are as a person. So as I just said, engaging in self-reflection can help us gain a better sense of who we are as a person. So it got me thinking about what are some of the benefits of self-reflection. First, like I was just alluding to, it helps you build your self-concept. So your self-concept includes your thoughts about your traits, abilities, beliefs, values, roles, and relationship, and plays a vital role in your mood, in your judgment, and your behavior. By reflecting inward, it allows you to get to know yourself as you change and develop as a person, which we are all constantly doing. We all change and grow, and things that we thought we believed years ago may not hold true for us anymore, which is why it's important to reflect on our thoughts, feelings, and actions and identify if they align with the person we are right now. Second, self-reflection can help enable self-development. When we reflect on our strengths and weaknesses, things we have done well, and mistakes we have made, it allows us to identify areas for growth and improvement, and then we can work on them. If we never take time to self-reflect on the things that may need to change in our life, we continue to do what we always have done, even if it's not what is best for us. This may in turn cause us to continue to face the same challenges because we are not engaging in behaviors that would produce a different outcome. The practice of self-reflection can also help us increase our self-awareness. It helps us recognize and understand our own emotions, as well as the impact of our emotions on our thoughts and behaviors. Self-reflection can also give us a greater sense of control. Part of self-reflection involves mindfulness and being present with ourselves in the moment. This mindfulness component can make us feel more grounded and in control of ourselves. Additionally, by reflecting on our thoughts and behaviors that in turn elicit change, we gain a sense of control over our behaviors and the changes we make. Self-reflection also puts us in greater alignment with our core values. I mentioned my first New Year's episode ever was on living a value-aligned 2021. I talk about values all the time. If you've listened to this podcast for any amount of time, you know I love to talk about values. So self-reflection can help us understand what we believe and why we believe it, which in turn can help us ensure that our words and actions are aligned with our core values. This alignment can also help us reduce what is called cognitive dissonance, which is a state where our beliefs and our actions conflict with one another. And this typically causes distress because if we reflect and recognize where our behavior doesn't align with our values, that is going to be uncomfortable. And that discomfort can lead us to make change, in turn, reducing that discomfort. Self-reflection can also improve communication skills with others. When we understand what we are feeling and why, it can help with expressing our emotional needs to others. When we are able to communicate these needs clearly to others, it can help us communicate more effectively, which in turn can improve our relationships. Self-reflection can also help with decision making. So when we understand ourselves better, we are able to evaluate all of our options and choices and the impact of those choices more clearly. It can help us make more sound decisions that we are comfortable with based on alignment with our core values and our self-concept. Further, another benefit of self-reflection is that it can help with accountability, both with ourselves and other people. So when we evaluate our actions and recognize areas in which our actions do not align with our values or the person we want to be, we can hold ourselves responsible, not only for past actions, but also with goals that we are working on moving forward. So we know that there is a lot of benefits to self-reflection. How do we actually practice self-reflection? So self-reflection is an intentional action that often requires us to have a calm mind when engaging in the practice. Because if our mind is distracted, it can be hard to really self-reflect. Some people prefer to begin their self-reflection with a short meditation or deep breathing to quiet their mind and get in a space where they can focus. However, obviously, this is not required. The key is to self-reflect when you are in a clear headspace. And if meditation or other skills allow you to get into that space, definitely engage in such before practicing self-reflection, but you don't have to do that. You might just naturally know my head is more clear when I first wake up in the morning, and that's when I'm going to practice self-reflection. Or you may just identify a time throughout your day or week that you're in a clear headspace and decide that is how you want to utilize your time by reflecting on yourself. So next, it is important to focus on a specific area or issue. Although there are likely many areas we want to reflect on in our lives, understandably, because we are complex human beings with multiple facets to ourselves, it can be overwhelming to try to reflect on our whole self rather than specific areas. So I am a huge fan of lists. And if you're a fan of lists like I am, you can write down different areas of your life you want to reflect on. Maybe this is finances, family, work, health, social connectedness, just to name a few. And then out of your list, you can pick one to start reflecting on. When it comes to reflection, it is important to ask ourselves open-ended questions. These can be broad if you don't necessarily know what area of self-reflection you want to focus on at first, such as, what am I doing in my life that makes me happy? Or they can be more specific, related to your targeted area of self-reflection, such as, in what way can I improve my financial situation? By asking ourselves broad questions, it may actually elicit more specific areas that we can focus on and then hone in on those more specific open-ended questions. Other questions that may prompt some self-reflection can include, are there things about myself that I would like to improve? What do I value most in life? How am I taking care of myself? What things are limiting me from achieving my goals? What patterns of behavior do I need to change? What are my strengths and what are my weaknesses? How can I be more authentically myself? Now, obviously, these are just some questions to reflect on, but there are plenty of other broad or specific questions that you can ask yourself to prompt self-reflection. When asking yourself open-ended questions, notice what thoughts and feelings arise with each question, and reflect on why that thought or feeling may have come up and what it means to you. It's also important that you explore these questions with curiosity and being open to whatever comes up rather than with judgment, as judging yourself will hinder your ability to truly self-reflect. If you do notice judgment coming up, ask yourself why and use that as information that something may need to change in that particular area. When asking yourself these questions, you can obviously do it mentally. However, it can be helpful to keep a journal of thoughts and responses to the questions that you ask yourself, because then you can look back on your responses, maybe find themes or patterns in your answers, and it may aid you in determining how to move forward. So I am a huge proponent of free-flowing journaling and just writing whatever comes to mind. So you can start with one of these self-reflective questions, but then just write down whatever comes up for you, even if it seems unrelated to the original prompt. I love free flowing journaling because a lot of times you might start with a specific thing that's on your mind, specific question you're answering, and then your mind takes you to a completely different place and you start realizing that maybe that's at the core of the issue, or things come up that you didn't even realize were bothering you, or things that you want to change in your life because you're not only honing in on that one question, you're allowing your mind and pen or pencil to flow wherever your mind leads you. Like I mentioned earlier, meditation can also be a good tool when it comes to self-reflection. As I said, self-reflection often requires us to have a calm mind when engaging in it. And so by engaging in the practice of meditation, even if it is only 5 minutes per day, it allows us to pay attention to what comes up for us, and it can prompt further reflection on what it means for us. Self-reflection can be done at any time, including at the beginning of a new year, beginning of a new month, or new week, where you sit down and have dedicated time to self-reflect. However, it can also be just as helpful to incorporate self-reflection into your daily routine so that you can make adjustments as you go, reflect on what is working and what doesn't in the moment or close to it, and so that it does not necessarily feel overwhelming. Because if you are like, I'm going to practice self-reflection in the new year, and then you're trying to reflect on your whole past year, that can be really overwhelming. Also, by self-reflection daily or almost daily, you then can determine what is working for you based on the season of life you are in. Because a lot of times we go through different seasons all within a year, maybe even within a month. And what was working for you previously may not be working now. What you thought you wanted to focus on may not be your top focus now. So that's another reason it may be good to incorporate this into a daily practice or almost daily. So some ways to include self-reflection in your daily routine include finding a time that you can be dedicated to working on it. So this can be when you first wake up, before you go to bed, during your lunch break, on your commute to work, really any time that you have alone and can dedicate, whether it be 5, 10, 15, or however many minutes you want to it. You also want to find a time that is free of distractions or has minimal distractions. As I mentioned earlier, we often need a calm mind to truly self reflect, and trying to engage in self reflection when we're doing a million other things or our environment is overstimulating will likely not be beneficial. So far in this episode, we have covered what self reflection is, the benefits of such, and how to practice it. But how can we take that self reflection and make decisions or take action based on what has come up for us? First, within your self reflection, it is important to identify growth areas. Upon reflection, you may realize that you are actually doing really well financially, for example, but you actually really need to work on boundary setting, or that your activity level could be better, but it's not necessarily a priority for you at the moment, but more intentional time with your family is, as another example. So pinpoint specific areas for improvement, jot them down, then prioritize them and determine which area or areas you want to focus on first. So, although you may want to work on a number of areas, trying to tackle many things at once can be overwhelming and often leads us to give up on our goals. So determine your priorities, whether that be the things that will make the most impact, the ones that you think will be the easiest to change, or whatever other reason you may prioritize something over another. Next, set a specific goal or goals based on the prioritized growth areas. For example, if you know an area you can grow in is being more intentional with your family, what are goals that you could set that would get you closer to that overarching goal of being more intentional with your family? Some ideas may include less time on your phone, scheduling family movie nights, including the kids in specific activities like cooking, dinner, etc. Once you identify your goals, make a plan for them. I am sure if you have listened to this podcast, you have heard of SMART goals before. So goals that are specific, which is the S, measurable, which is the M, achievable, which is the A, relevant, which is the R, and time bound, which is the T. And SMART goals, although I feel like many people kind of like roll their eyes at it, are actually good ways to help achieve your goals rather than making a very vague goal. For example, a vague goal is more family time. Well, that's not specific. That's not measurable. You could argue it could be achievable. You could argue it could be relevant, but it's also not time bound. What does more family time mean? What does it look like? So you can use the SMART goal framework. It's also important to create action steps to meet your goals, which usually involves breaking down your goals into smaller goals. So if we have this overarching goal of more intentional family time, and then I mentioned different ideas, but say you decide you're going to do that by having family movie nights. Okay, how often are we going to have family movie nights? Who's going to pick the movie? Are we going to have specific food that goes with it? So what goals are you going to set within that? Is the first goal having a family meeting, so to speak, and proposing this idea and seeing how it's received by your family? Is it getting ideas from your family on what would be the best way to approach it? Things like that. Accountability can also help with both setting goals and reaching those goals. So talking with your partner, talking with a friend or a colleague about your goals can be helpful in providing accountability while also brainstorming goals to make and hearing potentially different perspective on what may help with achieving your goals. I think it's also important to remember that any decision you make or goal you set should be met with flexibility and more time for self-reflection. So using the being more intentional with family example, because that's the one I keep using, you may set a goal for a family movie night weekly, but then you soon realize that your schedule is not actually conducive to a weekly family movie night. So instead of feeling like you failed at your goal, recognize that the goal is not conducive to your current life situation and just adjust the goal. There are other ways you can be more intentional with your family that doesn't involve a weekly family movie night. And that could be either making it less frequent, maybe it's twice a month or once a month, or it could be changing the goal completely because you're still working towards that overarching goal of having more intentional family time. This is also why incorporating self reflection into your daily routine is important because you can reflect on what is working and what is not, and pivot when you recognize something is not working sooner rather than later. So rather than waiting till the end of the month or year and realizing, oh, those family movie nights clearly didn't work and I failed, you can recognize, like, okay, it's been 2 weeks and we haven't been able to have a family movie night. Let's reflect on what's going on here. Because I want to emphasize yet again, if you don't achieve your goal, most often it's because the goal was not conducive to your current circumstances, whether that be life circumstances or whether that be you set a goal that doesn't really align with your values, who you are, etc. So, next, I want to talk about if there are downsides to self reflection. I would argue that self reflection is a healthy practice that is important to our overall well being. But with that being said, self reflection can become harmful when it's no longer about reflecting on your emotions, thoughts, and behaviors to elicit positive change, and rather it becomes rumination, self criticism, and self judgment. So, rumination occurs when someone focuses repeatedly on stressful and negative thoughts. If during the self reflection practice you identify something about yourself that you do not like, and instead of reflecting on how you want to change moving forward, you excessively and repeatedly think about the negative thing about yourself, it is likely that the self reflection has just turned into rumination. Self judgment is pretty self explanatory. It occurs when you are constantly judging yourself. But self reflection turning into self judgment may look like identifying emotions, behaviors, and thoughts that don't align with who you are, and then passing judgment on you for having those thoughts, emotions, or behaviors, rather than identifying them as things you want to change and reflect on how you are going to elicit that change. Similarly, self reflection at times can elicit negative self talk, which is the voice inside of your head that is mean and often discourages you from doing things you want to do. As an example, if you engage in self reflection and decide that you have spent too much time on your phone and you want to do something more active, negative self talk might tell you that you don't have the time, energy, or money to do so, which leads to another potential downside of self criticism, where you constantly criticize your actions and decisions. Further, self reflection, if not done properly, can lead to comparing yourself to others and feeling inferior to them. I say, if not done properly, because self reflection is all about focusing on the self. So, your actions, your thoughts, your feelings, but oftentimes, as we exist in the context of other people, we can find ourselves reflecting on our actions in the context of others, which may lead to comparison. So, if you find this happening to you, try to refocus your reflection to things outside of others, because at the end of the day, we cannot control the actions of others, nor do we really know what another person is thinking, feeling, or experiencing. On a broader scale, self reflection initially may just make you uncomfortable. It can bring up difficult emotions or just feel strange if it's not something you're used to. Many times when we are in a situation that makes us uncomfortable, we try to escape it, understandably, because who likes being uncomfortable? However, when we stop something because it's uncomfortable, we never grow, or we might claim that it doesn't work. Thus, if initially self reflection is uncomfortable for you, it is important to remind yourself that it is part of the process and it is important to get comfortable with the uncomfortable. Expectation management can help. So, expecting that it might not be super comfortable at first can prepare you for the discomfort. I want to validate that sitting with discomfort is hard. However, use that discomfort as a means to look for areas of growth and improvement instead of focusing on fears and worries. So, I wanted to end this episode with talking about some of the personal self reflection I have done over the past year and want to bring into 2025. Some of the things I'm going to be talking about will not impact you as a listener to this podcast at all. And there's one I'm going to share that may, but I thought it would be helpful for me to share some of my self-reflection and goals moving forward, not only for accountability purposes, which I already talked about in this podcast about how accountability can be helpful, but also to share some of my process. I am not going to be sharing all of my self-reflection, but a few that I just wanted to highlight. So, the first area I've done a lot of self reflection on over the past year is my relationship with social media. I have been posting on social media for years. So, well before I made my Jessica Lee PhD account back in 2020, where I just post about mental health and psychology, I had a fitness account. And before that, I had a Tumblr that was all about love and relationships, and it had over 20,000 followers, which, you know, back in 2010, I think, to whatever, 2014, like that was wild to me. I grew up in the MySpace, Zanga, Live Journal days. So I've been on social media for a long time. And when I first started my psychology account, I tried to post daily, if not more. Sometimes I would post multiple times a day, and I found myself being burnt out. So I approached social media as a post when inspire kind of post. I have also realized, though, especially this year, that even though I have a public account and I'm kind of approaching it from like a post when I am inspired to post, I was still pressuring myself to only talk about things related to mental health because it is a psychology mental health account. Now, it's not affiliated with my employer. It's not affiliated with any private practice because I don't have a private practice. It is a quote unquote personal account that is based off of me being a psychologist, but I am not only a psychologist. And so once I started realizing, because there was a lot of things I wanted to post about, which one could argue could be tangentially related to mental health, because a lot, if not most things in life they impact our mental health. Once I realized like I could post things and I started posting things that were not directly related to mental health and getting good feedback, um, I felt a lot better. And I was like, okay, this aligns with who I am, my stage of life. Like, I posted a lot of motherhood stuff, which obviously people can relate or relate that back to mental health. I've done a number of episodes on this podcast about motherhood and mental health, but that made sense for my season of life as I welcomed my second child last year. I started posting a lot of stuff about politics, which I'm going to talk more here in a minute, which I could also argue is related to mental health because the sociopolitical climate impacts people's mental health. Also, therapy is inherently political because we are impacted by the sociopolitical climate, access to mental health care, all of those things. And so once I just like started posting things that felt good to me and wasn't just forcing myself to come up with mental health related content, it felt a lot better. And even just like a reflection from today, I have like I think it's going to be a 3-part series in mind that somebody asked me to do. And I was like all gung ho to record videos this morning. And I was like, I just don't feel like it. And that's okay. And that's something that it took me a long time to realize like it is okay. And I have way more reflections about social media. But that's been a big one for me about like, does this still feel good for me? Or is it draining me? Because if something is draining you, whether it be your time on social media or something else, that's probably an indicator that something needs to change. So I just mentioned politics, and this has been probably one of the biggest reflections I've had the past year. And so obviously the presidential election happened in the US this past year. This episode is released in the beginning of January. We have inauguration coming up this month. And I will be the first to admit, like when I first was able to vote back in the 2008 presidential election was the first one I was able to vote in. I didn't know much about politics. I was a very low information voter. And over the past 8 years or so, I have educated myself more. Um, but still, I would argue that I was a low-ish information voter. But this past year, I found myself getting heavily interested in and involved in politics. And part of that I credit to my maternity leave because my maternity leave was over the summer and a lot of big things when it comes to presidential politics happened on my leave. The attempted assassination of, I was going to say former President Trump and incoming President Trump, President Biden stepping down from the race, Vice President Harris, becoming the Democratic nominee. All of that was happening during my maternity leave. And I had a lot of time on my hands. So I would spend most of my time online consuming politics and posting about politics. And like I said, people may argue that that has nothing to do with mental health and therapy, but it absolutely does. And I realized like that was what I was passionate about talking about. And I wasn't going to make a whole separate account to talk about those things. And I won't get into all of my reflections, but I gained a lot of knowledge and insights about politics in the US, the lack of understanding of our political systems that so many have. And I'll fully admit, I still have a lot that I don't know and need to learn. And even more so, one big reflection I had was the importance of politics on a local level, which is something I already knew, but it was highlighted to me a lot more this year. So, with all of this moving forward and this self reflection, it made me realize like I need to continue to educate myself more on politics and be more involved in the local level, not just during presidential election years. Um, and hopefully, being more educated, more involved, things like that will help really elicit change at the community and state level, and then maybe at the national level. I also realized as I was just saying that goal, I never said my goal for social media earlier, which was really just posting what feels good to me because that's what feels good. And like I said, I've had a lot more reflections about social media, but I'm not going to bore you all with those. Another big reflection I had this year is about health. So if you have followed me for any amount of time, knew me from my fitness Instagram days, know me personally, you know I work out daily, at minimum 6 times a week. I also eat relatively healthy. One could argue during the holiday season, the food I am consuming has not been the healthiest, but I feel better and enjoy healthier food. But I did a lot of self-reflecting on the fact that I've had my second child now and last baby, most likely, significantly likely last baby. Um, and that was just something that I don't know. I reflect on. I hear moms a lot of times like talk about like the grief that comes with it. For me, so far, there hasn't been grief with that. It's more like, okay, we're to and through is what I keep saying. And like now it's time for me to take care of my body and health for me. Um, and so that I can live a long, healthy life and watch my kids grow up. But I am in my mid 30s now. And health is much more than just exercise and diet. And yes, people would argue that those are some of the most important things. Obviously, drinking water is really important, staying hydrated. But there's things like bone health. Like I have literally never thought of my bone health in my life. Skin health. I have thought of skin health in the sense of I had really bad acne through my teenage years and 20s, but like skin elasticity, the fact that our skin is our biggest organ and we need to protect it, as well as like a host of other things like oral health. I don't know, just a lot of things that beyond exercise and diet I can be doing for myself. So I reflected on aspects of my health that I could improve. Sleep is a big one, but I would argue right now, a lot of that is out of my control, having an infant. Joint pain is another one. I've had chronic lower back pain since I was in a car accident in high school. And there are things that I could be doing, not only for my lower back, but other joints to help with that. I've also reflected on what I do and don't prioritize in my health habits. I definitely prioritize exercise. That is like one of the biggest things I prioritize. I prioritize brushing my teeth, but there's other things that I can be doing for my health that I don't prioritize. And by doing this reflection, by asking myself those open ended questions, it helped me come up with areas of health that I really want to focus on this year, given my age and my stage of life. So a lot of it's going to be like bone and skin health, a lot of like working from within, really listening to my body, what feels good for me, what doesn't, etc. And so the final reflection I want to highlight on this podcast is about podcasting. So obviously, this is the first episode of season 5. I have some great guest episodes coming out in the next few weeks. But I took a break from podcasting as I was adjusting to my life being a mom of 2 and recognizing I do not have nearly as much time as I previously did. So during the break, I scheduled some interviews. I also have had to set a lot of boundaries around that, just based on my season of life and actually like only having set times throughout the week that I'm willing to do interviews. I have continued with my other podcast, Welcome to Group Therapy. And just even doing those things made me do some hard and deep reflection on what I want with regard to podcasting and what is realistic for me. I have met so many brilliant people in the podcasting space, and I love talking about topics I am passionate about in longer form content than I can do on social media. And I have to face the reality that when I started this podcast, I had no children, and it was during the pandemic, and my life has drastically changed since then. So I have always been super rigid when it comes to this podcast, releasing weekly episodes of Monday at 12 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. And if I have to take a week off, I usually post on social media that there is no episode this week. I found myself recording solo episodes on Sunday nights just to be released a few hours later on Monday morning, or thinking I would have time during the week to prep and record when I actually don't. And through all of this reflection, the thing that kept coming up is I don't want to give up podcasting. I don't. Like, that is not something that aligns with who I am right now and what I want in my life. But I also had to sit with the fact that what I've been doing for almost 5 years at this point, because this podcast released the beginning of May of 2020, is not realistic for where I am in life right now. Like, what I was doing when I first created this podcast, when I had no idea what I was doing, is not going to work for the life I have right now. Work is busier. I have 2 kids. I have a husband. Priorities are just different. And I'll be honest, that was really hard to sit with. Like, of all the areas of my life I've done self-reflection over the past year, this may sound silly, but podcasting and social media in general was probably one of the hardest ones to figure out, what I wanted from those things. And so the word that kept coming up when I was reflecting on podcasting is flexibility. I realized that I want to continue doing this, but doing so without stressing myself out, without sacrificing a lot of time with my family, because I do this as a hobby. I do not do this as my job. I don't make money off of podcasting. I do this because I love the connections I make and I love giving information about topics that I'm passionate about. And so, as someone that does this for a hobby and loves it, it's not fun if I'm stressing myself out or sacrificing other areas of my life. And thus, to be able to hold all the things I want for my life, I need to be flexible in my approach to podcasting. So, what this means for you all as the listeners, there will be times that there are weekly episodes coming out. And then there will be other times where an episode doesn't drop for a week or two. I am no longer going to force myself to come up with an episode topic just to put an episode out because I want to ensure I am providing valuable and quality content. I have also limited when I record guest episodes, like I said earlier, and how many I will do a week to ensure I'm not taking away hours upon hours from family, as I realize like family is truly my priority in this season of life. So with that said, Psych Talk will be continuing. Don't you worry. For the next month or so, episodes will be released weekly because I have them batched. I did a lot of guest episodes, so I'm excited for those to come out. Beyond that, we will see. I will let you all know if I'm going to take another big break at any point. However, I hope that you all understand and continue to stick around, even if the episodes are not as consistent as they once were. Like I said, but I want to reiterate this point. The self-reflection on my podcasting was probably the hardest area because I love it so much and I don't want to feel like I am letting people down. And I recognize my life has changed. My priorities have changed, and to best serve you all and provide valuable content, I need to reorganize how I work. Who knows what the future holds, but right now, this is where I sit. So with all that being said, thank you so much for joining me for today's episode. Thank you for kicking off season 5 of Psych Talk with me. I hope you learned some valuable things about self-reflection, some action steps you can take to start your self-reflection journey in the new year, some downsides and how to catch them if you are engaging in self-reflection and then start realizing you're self-criticizing or judging or ruminating. As always, please rate, review, and subscribe to the podcast. I believe we are up to 94 ratings across Spotify and Apple Podcasts. So thank you all who have taken time to rate or leave a review. And as always, I will see you in the next episode. Bye.
Thank you for listening to today's episode of Psych Talk. I hope you found so much value. If you loved what you heard or gained some knowledge, I would love for you to take a screenshot, put it on your Instagram stories, and tag me at Jessica Lee, PhD. Additionally, I would be honored if you leave a review and 5-star rating so I can continue to help this podcast grow. If you are not already, follow me on Instagram and join my Facebook community, Grow Through What You Go Through. Thank you for joining me today, and I cannot wait for you to join me during the next episode. Remember, you are loved, you are worthy, and you are braver than you know.